Hello and welcome to Beacon of Creation, a weekly podcast on game design through the lens of Magic the Gathering. I'm Juliet.
And I'm Redbay, otherwise known as Brad.
Well, Brad, we've got an exciting thing to talk about today. We've got multiple sets potentially to talk about, which is a kind of that's a wider purview than we often are talking about here on Beacon of Creation. There's a cool new format for designing sets that's just come out.
Yeah, and I think this stems from Ignited doing You Make the Packs with us on Beacon of Creation and thinking about how to get cards played with each other. And he came up with this kind of exciting format called Micro Set.
Yeah. So the idea, the original idea is a 2-player custom card design game type with the idea of micro set duplicate sealed. So each player makes a micro set of 45 cards, singleton. So, each card is individual in private, following a few loose guidelines. Once they're both satisfied with their portion, they reveal their sets. And then you can discuss any balance changes needed at that point. Then they play duplicate sealed with those combined microsets. So my 45 plus your 45 together. And then we both each look at that sealed pool. And I'm going to build from my set of those 90 cards, and you're going to build from your set of those 90 cards. And then, we got the addition of, you can choose one guild gate to have up to 4 of in your deck in addition to any basic lands. And the 45 unique cards follow some rarity and color restrictions. So 6 rares or mythics, 12 uncommons, 27 commons, no lands. In your rares and uncommons, no 2 cards of the same rarity can share a color identity, and you need to have at least 9 creatures. And for commons, 4 of each monocolor, 3 colorless, 4 wild cards, all with unique color identity from each other, and at least 12 creatures, which that's a lot of numbers back and forth. But basically, this is something like a sealed pool or a snapshot of a set. And then the extra note of a micro set should feel like a distilled version of a standard set as much as possible. Minimize the number of non-evergreen or deciduous mechanics and have an overarching theme for the set. And the result is, as we say, either a snapshot of a bigger set or a microcosm of what a bigger set could be if you try to balance out a whole thing in this very minute, petite sort of package.
So there's lots to unpack here in terms of, so the mention of duplicate sealed, that was a tournament format for a invitational tournament, I think was the first place it was used. And
right. Yeah.
So there's this concept where you and your opponent both have access to the same 90 cards, and you're looking at the 90 cards, and you get to go through this process of identifying what are the most powerful cards in the 90, knowing that your opponent also has access to the same 90, and you get into this very micro metagaming thing, which I think is super interesting. And that's what I found really appealing about jumping into this micro set exercise was, okay, I'm going to make a cool 45 cards. Somebody else is going to make a cool 45 cards. We're going to mix them together, and you can really go into a lot of depth on just 90 cards, which is hard to do in a lot of the whole Magic the Gathering space. There's usually hundreds of cards when you're talking about going from draft to standard to modern to, the mega formats like Legacy or Vintage.
And one of the neat things about duplicate sealed is I think about it in kind of an Ivars Peterson sort of way for anyone who's interested in old math sort of ideas, similar to how you create fairness. Let's say we have a cake and we want to divide it fairly between you and me. Well, how would we do that? Well, one way is I cut the cake into 2 pieces and then you pick which piece that you want. That way, I, the person who's cutting, am incentivized to try to get as close to equal as possible. And neither of us has a major advantage over the other. In optimal play, we'll end up with exactly equal, or exactly as much cake as we, want out of that sort of idea. Similarly here, if I'm designing some cards that end up being broken or whatever, or there's some combination of, oh, one of my engine cards and one of your payoff cards make this particularly strong thing. Well, we both have access to that. And so, not saying that any combination of sets of 45 cards into a duplicate sealed pool is going to always result in fun gameplay, but there is a self-balancing factor of that compared to if we were playing sealed pools from a big set and each of us got, a random set of packs or things like that.
Almost a chess version of Magic Sealed, where everybody has access to the same pieces. It's definitely an interesting. It's definitely an interesting format for somebody to jump into, and I think another appealing part of this is 45 cards is way less than like the 260 cards needed for a standard set, or the 360 cards generally used for a cube. It's almost like, by being bite size, you can kind of feel like you can just jump in, and the commitment level also feels lower. So if you're not happy with your 45 cards at the end of it, that's okay. You probably didn't spend months of your time working on the designs, working on the development of them. I think most people did their 45 cards in about a week, maybe a week and a half. And what came out of it is something that we can still play with and get eyes on and comment on. And again, not too much effort in terms of putting it together in the first place.
And it's also neat that another big comparison of this to, we can talk about duplicate sealed, we can talk about comparison to a bigger set. Comparing it to a smaller thing, which is like a jumpstart pack.
Mm-hmm.
A given jumpstart pack needs to have such internal like consistency or synergy or like focus on theme, and so few cards of higher rarity in comparison that you can only get a small snapshot of things unless you are really going deep in the tank or designing like a jumpstart environment, like I often try to do with my jumpstart packs, which is, okay, here are 10 jumpstart packs that go together in interesting ways. This is bigger than an individual pack, but smaller than an entire jumpstart format. It's bigger than 12 cards, but smaller than 120. 45 is a really interesting sweet spot when you're also trying to potentially get a number of different color combinations. One of the things that Ignited points out is that if this is done repeatedly, either by two people or by a bigger group, you can mix and match these micro sets like jumpstart packs to make these different sealed environments, or you could put like 4 of them together to make a cube.
Yeah. Something that we haven't touched on yet for this particular exercise is we also attached a one-word prompt. And I think you came up with that one-word prompt, which was technique.
Yeah. Originally, there was the idea of, okay, we just do it in a vacuum. But I was like, I feel like a one-word prompt gives us plenty of space to work from, but gives us a place to start from. And so I was like, what's a good thing? I was riffing through some stuff and I was like, oh, a rare skin, the classic thing that gives us ars machina, art, etc. And I was like, oh, right, technique. This is a fun place to work from. And we ended up seeing so far, as of recording of this pod, we've got 5 different micro sets now submitted, and there'll be a link in the show notes so you can actually see all 5 of them. Ignited's put together a pretty cool little mini MSE set hub for each of these 5 sets, so you can kind of scroll through them as you would a spoiler. So we're going to talk about these sets in extreme brevity, and then maybe have more deep dive later on. But our good friend Peter, aka Mono Whiteboarder, gave us the set archery ? Ready to take a bow, or a bow, as it were.
I believe, yes, that the set's name is archery. And Peter, I know when he was working on this environment, he was taking advantage of the 45 cards where he could focus all of his art, all of his mechanics, and all of his flavor on this specific subset of like martial militant technique. And the result of that is we got a lot of archers. We have a mechanic that creates arrow tokens, which is how these archers kind of reload and shoot their bows. And what I really appreciated about this take was really leaning into the 45 card space. That it would be odd to see a full-size standard set entirely dedicated to archery, but 45 cards, it's pretty easy to see, it's pretty easy to understand, and it makes all the cards feel cohesive together, even without the mechanical things bringing it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll also put a link to the episode from over a year ago where we go through kind of the different mechanical identities that archers and archery has had through Magic's history, because that's something that has certainly changed a lot in some interesting ways over the 20 plus years. But here we see, as you say, these arrow tokens, which are little equipment artifacts that boost power and then are sacrificed at the end of combat when you attack with them. Ambush, which is a little bit like the new Mardu mechanic in some ways, where you're creating a little 1/1 with haste and then sacrificing it at the end of the turn. And volley, which is an ability word for if you attack with 2 or more other creatures this turn. And so we have arrow tokens, archer tokens, and volley as kind of different iterations on this idea that end up working together in a whole. There's also Kalthrasha Genesis, which is the microset designed by Ignited Soul, the original kind of progenitor of our microset format, which is like ritual magic, Aztec sort of Mesoamerican inspired sort of microset, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely gives me Ixalan vibes, but without leaning into the 4 major Ixalan tribes. Like, we don't see a predominance of dinosaurs, for example, in this space. And I think that helps kind of separate Kalthrasha from Ixalan. And then we do see a couple returning mechanics. So we have Boast, which was originally from Kaldheim. You attack with the creature, you pay some type of cost, you get an effect. We also see the return of blood tokens, which is something I was really excited about. I think blood tokens were a very novel artifact introduced back in Crimson Vow, and there's been a lot of talk in the canon sphere about how that token might have been a little bit wasted for being so tied to vampire flavor. But I think in this like ritual environment, as you mentioned, that blood tokens definitely have a flavor space that feels disconnected from vampires, which is awesome. And then we have a couple new mechanics. We have Invoke, which it seems to be put on permanence, and you can tap some number of creatures, and you can exile a ritual. So that's the permanent is a subtype is ritual, and then you can return it to the battlefield during your next turn. So you get a little bit more value out of your card at the sacrifice of tapping some of your attackers or blockers down.
And it's typically like an enchantment with an ETB, and so it's coming out and then it's coming back in to refresh that ETB.
Yeah. So for example, Ritual of Eclipse, 2 and a green enchantment ritual. When this ritual enters, draw a card. You may play an additional land this turn. Then it has Invoke 4. Tap any number of creatures you control with total power 4 or more. Exile this ritual. Return it to the battlefield at the beginning of your next upkeep. Activate only as a sorcery.
Mm-hmm. And then I think the last mechanic from that is Animate, which is very similar to what's the name of the Zendikar? Awaken. Like, it's one of the Zendikar mechanics. My brain melts trying to keep all of those straight from one another. It's something that goes on instants and sorceries, or sorceries especially, that it's like a kicker cost or a greater cost. And if you cast for the higher cost, you're putting a subset of, or a specific number set of +1/+1 counters on a land you control, and it becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste in addition to its other types. But in this case, it could also go on an artifact or a land instead of just on a land. So it's kind of a twist on Awaken for Animate, which Animate makes sense. We use that a lot for turning artifacts into creatures. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about this set that I designed, which is called Curtains Fall. And it has a really small number of mechanics total. I tried to follow bar cube rules, so no counters and no tokens. I also used boast as, this returning mechanic from Kaldheim with this idea of creatures attacking, and then you can activate this for some cost and you get some fun bonus for the creature out of it. And then I also have a reusing ETV mechanic. This one goes mostly on creatures. It's called Pawn. It's when this enters, if you cast it from your hand, you may exile it plotted, cast it at sorcery speed on a future turn it for no cost. And it's like, this is a twist on plot that we saw in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but kind of put a different direction. Curtains Fall is a set entirely inspired from Commedia dell'arte, the term for it, masked stock character theater in different ways. And so there's a lot of plotting and pawning and having your servants go do a thing, but then they are actually scheming for somebody else, and servant of two masters sort of things. And speaking of being a servant of two masters, the third mechanic from Curtains Fall is puppet, which is a action word, specifically that you puppet target player, or occasionally something, a card is like, oh, puppet defending player, or target player puppets you, etc., for a specific period of time. And then the reminder text for it is really fun and really short. So like puppet target player until end of turn, you control that player. You cannot look at their hand. Short and sweet and full of complex stuff on the back end of the rules.
The puppet mechanic is another thing that I think is mostly possible due to the small environment that is being introduced in. It's something that I think would be difficult to do on a large scale, or especially when you start thinking about how it would play in like a standard environment or a modern or legacy type space, commander, for example. But in an environment where it's going to be two players, there's 90 cards, everybody has access to the same amount of cards. There's only 5 cards with puppet in the environment, and they're in 3 colors: black, red, and white. So you could imagine that you crack open your duplicate sealed, and you may not even necessarily end up in these colors, so you may not even end up with puppet in your deck. So the risk associated with a splashy mechanic like this one is mitigated by it's a small environment. There's only so many cards. You still have to put together functional decks. You're very aware that your opponent might have puppet cards as well, so you're going to try to build your deck in that space. Another thing I just want to talk about with Curtains Fall is, Juliet, you spent some time making a beautiful card frame for this environment, which really makes the cards stand out against the other sets available in this first forgo into micro setting.
I should say that I did use a relatively new card frame in MSC. This is not a Juliet Photoshop special, but this is a going through and being like, well, wait a minute, this is perfect for my weird theater set. So this is in the mainframe alterations. There's a new card notes frame that you can do, which is just put exclamation point curtain or curtains, and it puts a little curtain frame on top. It doesn't work for a lot of things. You got to like fiddle and mess around with stuff to get it to work. And so that was another limitation on things. But I thought it was a nice touch that you're looking at this, you're like, okay, this is what happens on stage in a real way. But yeah, I like a fun little card frame. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's a nice thing. I don't think Canon Magic should constantly have new card frames every set, but I think it's a neat way to make a custom set have a sort of sense of identity with itself. And then we have Chords set, which is Vocal Techniques, a musical themed set, not like Broadway musical, but like a music-esque set, a set that has a music sort of vibe to it in some ways. I feel there's vocalists and birdsong and harmony and listening and singing and sirens and harmonization and more. There's a lot of mechanics in this one. Would you like to start us off on some of those? just at the top level? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that this is a subset of Vokgal by Chord, which is an environment that they've been working on for a while, and they've been sharing designs on the Beacon Creation Discord. So there's lots to see there on the bigger scale, and then this is kind of a micro set to maybe help somebody see just a part of it. And then, yeah, so from returning mechanics, we do have Exalted, Prowess, Proliferate, and Decayed. And then we also have some hybrid. The extension there now is some colorless Brid. So you can pay a colorless mana like you did with... There's a lot of Zendikar returning mechanics. And I'm just starting to realize that now as we're talking about these sets. The pure colorless, not just generic symbol is used here. And then even colorless 2 Brid makes an appearance here as well.
Which is so that you could pay 2 generic mana or 1 specifically colorless mana, which is a really fun little symbol.
Yeah, and then we have Finale, which is an ability word that cares about when enchantments go into the graveyard from the battlefield, which ties together with Murmur tokens, which are a saga token where the first chapter is nothing, and then chapters 2 and 3 you get a colorless mana, which also helps contribute to the colorless cost requirements on some of the cards. And then those also will trigger Finale. The one I want to talk about the most, which I think is a really exciting piece of technology, are the battle summons. So we have creatures, they have the adventure frame, but on the bottom right-hand corner where of the adventure rules box, you actually see a defense counter. So these are creatures that you can cast for a large mana cost generally, or you can cast them for a cheaper mana cost and they enter the battlefield as a battle. And then when you defeat them, you get to cast the creature.
Mm-hmm. So it's a single-sided battle without any ETB, but that you have a very clear, everybody can see what you're getting as the payoff, and kind of a twist on this. Cast for cheap, do a bunch to get the big beefy fun creature out of it in a fun way.
And then I think the last mechanic is Purge, which is a keyword action where you remove all of the counters from a permanent, and then you also unattach everything from it. So it goes into unattach all auras, equipment, and fortifications from it. Fortifications being potentially a nod to our popcorn exercise earlier this year,
where I designed many interesting fortifications. I think there was a mild expectation that, or there was a chance that, given a group of us, including the few of us in particular, that there could have been, and then this set has a cycle of common fortifications plus 2 rare ones, or whatever, could easily have been. It's also interesting to think about like how different remove all the counters from target permanent is when you're hitting a creature or a planeswalker or a saga where you have very different things, or a battle, another kind of big different sort of thing that could be. But with all of that aside, let's talk about Veyrathal. Do you have a pronunciation for? Tell us about Veyrathal, the micro set that you have developed.
Yeah, so Veyrathal,
Veyrathal.
I think I'm going to pronounce that differently every time, just for establishing that I am. Oh, what's that type of narrator? The one you can't trust.
Yeah, I'm probably unreliable, but also never trust any narrator. I mean, listen to them, but be careful who you.
Yeah,
Careful of
exactly.
things you say, children will listen, as we always say. The classic Veyrathal saying, careful the things you say, children will listen.
Exactly. So I read the prompt technique, and there was some very preliminary discussion amongst the players for this microset exercise. And some folks were saying, I don't want to do the obvious thing. I want to kind of next level it. And I was like, well, that sounds like something you can do. I'm going to do the thing that's obvious to me, because I actually don't know if all of us were going to be on the same page. And when I look at the sets that have come out so far, we're not on the same page. So I feel like you could definitely go with the first idea if you wanted to. And
not being on the same page is in this case like a positive thing. It's not like we
absolutely.
were radically different as to like what magic cards should be or what like what a sealed environment could be, but that what our starting kind of flavor focus, what our interpretation of the word technique would be. And the like first level, you don't necessarily have to go, well, don't you know technique means this other thing. Even your first response can be different as far as a flavor inspiration point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that I develop with a lot of my set ideation, and I shared this with everybody as things are kind of going on, was I like to kind of come up with the splashy mechanic first. I want to try to get the templating to a space where I can make some cards. I'll make some commons up with that mechanic. And then when I do that, I'll think about the world where that mechanic makes sense. And then I might pick a canon mechanic or something, or a typal attribution or something like that would go along with that first splashy mechanic. And then I'll make some commons up with this kind of this second sphere. And then with those first two things, I'll think, okay, what goes against this? What's something that can be antagonistic? And then I'll start making cards there. And
Mm-hmm.
from there, it's finish out the commons, maybe make some role player cards, things that I think sets could use in general to have good playability. And then from there, it's go up, right? Make the uncommons, make the rares, and then lots of iteration kind of along the way. What cards are working, what cards aren't working in a very theoretical space, right? We don't have infinite time for design, playtest, develop, design, playtest, develop over and over and over again. Everybody was pretty happy with the idea of we can submit something in a rough state and we can always adjust as needed, which means that you can leave some stuff in there where you can question it and then just, hey, let's see how it plays and then go from there.
Yeah. So from a flavor perspective, introduce us to Veyrathal.
So another
Sorry,
lingering
let me do another take on this. Introduce us to
perfect pronunciation, and
you gotta really chew it in the back of your throat.
Another thing that was lingering in my backlog of stuff that I've wanted to do in custom Magic spaces was something more aligned to, I'm going to say generic fantasy, not to disparage the work or anybody else's work, but just in the space of we've got creatures, we've got monsters, we've got people that do jobs, we've got adventuring. And so when I thought about technique, I thought of skill trees in role-playing games. And when you're leveling up, how you can put a point into a skill tree and you can become a fighter or a mage or a druid or something like that. And you can learn these new skills and they help develop your character's gameplay. And a lot of the time people will start to ascribe some like flavorful notes, even though there may not be anything in the game that actually works with that, but their character grows as they do that. So I came up with Skill Up. So Skill Up is featured on every type of magic card. And for example, we have Skulking Assassin, which is 2 and a black, creature, human, rogue. It is a 2/2. And it has Death Touch. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, skill up. Yeah. And that has the reminder text, add a point to your skill tree. If you develop a new skill this way, you may activate it.
Which has us looking at a outside the game card that is reminiscent of, but maybe a little bit more straightforward than a dungeon card. And so this card is named Skill Tree, and it says, whenever you develop a new skill, you may activate it. Otherwise, you may activate one of your developed skills during each of your turns as a sorcery. Wow, that's a big piece of text that is not necessarily on the other cards in the game. So each turn you can do this in, I know, I think this is kind of like a Lyris esque thing of like, yeah, each turn you can do this once. Probably tap the skill tree just to indicate that you have or whatever, but it doesn't actually tap or anything. It's not a game piece. And then there are 3 vertical tracks in this skill tree. One named Fighter, and then it has 3 abilities. One named Mage, and then it has 3 abilities. And one that's named Tracker, and it has 3 abilities. And so the Fighter goes from put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control that doesn't have one. And then its second level is tokens can't block this turn. And then its third and final level is draw a card if you attacked this turn. Mage has 3 abilities. This skill deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then create a 1/1 red elemental creature token, and then discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. And finally, Tracker's 3 abilities are Scry 1, and then untap target land you control, and then pay 2 mana, draw a card.
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted the skill tree to be something where once you unlocked a skill that you would be able to access that skill. The sorcery speed and once per turn clauses are to make it so you don't have to think about it during an opponent's turn, and conversely, your opponent doesn't have to think about your skill tree during their own turn while they're taking actions. And then once per turn is just a nice limiter for, like, you're not going to get 9 of these abilities on a given turn or anything like that. Or maybe it opens up some designs in a future environment where like a green creature says you can activate multiple skills in a turn or something like that. I picked Fighter, Mage, and Tracker because they are not creature types in Magic, as far as I remember. I did try to double check these, but maybe they'll be proven wrong by the time somebody listens to this episode. Who knows? And then they're not perfect analogs to D&D or anything like that, but I think that they are evocative enough that somebody would understand, okay, this is what this type is doing versus what this type is doing.
I think that makes plenty of sense. I wouldn't look at these 3 types if they were like, wow, this cool new video game. It lets you play as a fighter, a mage, or a tracker. I wouldn't be like, this is inspiring me forever or anything. But as like an encapsulation of flavor identities into simple things that don't already have rules meaning within Magic and that can kind of collect certain amounts of stuff. So it's pretty easy to tell what is a mage, but you don't have to think too hard about it. I think this works really well. And so thinking about skill up, we had that skulking assassin. And so it doesn't say skill up fighter or skill up tracker. So if you're playing it in a particular deck, you can pick which thing you're doing the skill up to, which tree you're adding your point to, and either try to max out one or have more options, or each thing you're doing, or maybe you have a deck that wants a specific thing. I'm looking at a common like Emra's Torrent. It's 1 blue and a blue for a common instant with choose 1, counter target creature spell, or return target creature to its owner's hand. And then if you have developed each of the mage skills, draw a card. So if you've got the full 3 points in your mage skill tree, this is going from a flexible counter or bounce into counter draw or bounce draw.
This was late in the development where I decided that having this call out for becoming a full-fledged fighter or a full-fledged mage or a full-fledged tracker, that would be a way to get people to go down tracks differently than they might do in other games. So the other example here is Golden Champion, which is a 3-mana artifact creature construct warrior. It's a 2/1. It's an uncommon. And it has this creature is all colors, and during your turn, this creature has double strike. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you developed each of the fighter skills, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature.
And so if you can, before the first +1/+1 counter is put on this, cast this and use your once per turn fighter thing to put a +1/+1 counter on this, you can make this a 3/2 that it has double strike while attacking at least. Or then each turn you're like, okay, this is a 3/2, this is a 4/2, this is this really incentivizes you to either when you first got it out or at some point in the game, get to your 3 points. And then this is something that your opponent probably has to remove or chump block often to try to get off, because I don't know, a growing double striker is always a fun threat. There's also cards that want you to have skills developed, but not necessarily in a specific tree. So thinking about something like Scroll Peddler, this is another blue common. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/2 creature human wizard. And when this creature enters, skill up. So that rather than a recurring thing, it's just a one-time skill up, add a point to your skill tree. And just as a refresher, when you add that point to your skill tree, if you develop a new skill this way, you may activate that new skill. So sometimes it's like, well, I really want to be maxing out my fighter, but I need to get a 1/1 onto the battlefield. I'm going to get my mage to level 2 or kind of a skill tree point 2 so I can get that 1/1 red elemental creature token. But Scroll Peddler also has whenever you skill up, create a tapped treasure token. This ability only triggers once each turn. So over the course of a game, you might be like, I don't care about these tracker abilities, or I don't care about fighter tokens can't block this turn. My opponent doesn't have any tokens or token creators, but I'm still getting this skill point in, and I'm getting this treasure token out. Or to look at another similar card, Hulking Firesmith, which is an uncommon for 7 and a red. It's a 7/6 artifact creature golem artificer. And this spell costs 1 less to cast for each skill you have developed. So, you know, you could cast this for a single red mana potentially. This 7/6 trampler, which is a pretty neat thing. The Firesmith also has the ability, whenever this creature enters or attacks, create a colorless equipment artifact token named Sword. With equipped creature gets +1/+1 and equip 2 generic mana.
So Peter and I both landed on equipment tokens between our two environments. Peter's arrow tokens are more temporary, swords are more permanent.
Mhm.
We really like sword tokens as a way of like an alternative method of doing a +1/+1 counter where you get the benefit of you feel like you can put energy and mana into making a creature larger, and then when that creature is inevitably removed or you otherwise win the game, you get to kind of move those +1/+1 counters around without that bulky text of, when this creature dies, move its +1/+1 counters onto another target creature you control. Swords just, hey, I'm here, move me around.
This does match up with this sword token created by Blacksmith's Talent back in Bloomborough, which is a class that enters and creates this same sword. It's a +1/+1 sort of equipment with equip 2.
Moving on to the second mechanic. So we've got skill up, we've got the skill tree, we're developing our classes. That made me think about the party mechanic from Zendikar Rises. And the concept here is that you have the 4 creature types: cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. And as long as you're controlling those, you might have a partial party, you might have a full party, and you get various benefits for that. So I actually stole Deadly Alliance from Zendikar Rises, 4 and a black instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. Your party consists of up to 1 each of cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. And it says destroy target creature or planeswalker. Functional removal gets a little bit better if you're able to diversify your creature types. And I think flavorfully connected to skill tree in a way that people will not look sideways at it, and offers incentives for building decks in unique ways. And I think I was of the mind that these creature classes are pretty ubiquitous. And if we were to put my microset into a pool with another microset, that party would actually still potentially play well because people are going to probably make some clerics, rogues, warriors, and wizards. For example, there are a whole bunch of rogues in Curtains Fall.
Yeah, in Curtains Fall, the 2 of these things that show up, because Curtains Fall has a weird creature type thing going on. There are many fewer wizards or clerics than you would typically find, because basically the rogues are what we would think of as the Zanies or Zanies, the servant sort of characters. And so your Harlequins, your Colombinas, your Scaramouches, that sort of thing are rogues. And so with plenty of those to, be pawning in and out, we've got a number of rogues to fit at your party, if you are pairing up Curtains Fall with Veyrathal, you can have, okay, I know I'm going to have Rogue. Sadly, the soldier, I'm realizing that, oh, right, party is warriors, not soldiers. And so I've got soldiers because they are capitans. They're the soldier archetype, which is a specific thing that has to do with Italian and Iberian Peninsula politics from 600 years ago and everything. But as a result, it's going to be mostly rogues contributing to the party here. But if we look at a different set, there's a decent chance that an average set of 45 cards with a bunch of creatures in it is going to have some combination of things. You've got a really splashy new party card here that I'd love to show off so the listener can be thinking about. It's Gather the Party. It's 1 green and a white for a rare sorcery with look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 cleric, rogue, warrior, and or wizard cards from among them. Put up to 1 of the revealed cards onto the battlefield and the other into your hand. And then put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. Which is a doozy of a sneak and show if you've got the relevant creature types.
Yeah, a standard interaction from probably 5 years ago now was Winota, red-white creature from Ikoria. A common thread up and until it got banned was to Winota out a Agent of Treachery, which is a human 7-mana blue card, and when it enters the battlefield, you take control of something. So really, really powerful. Definitely feels like you're getting away with something that you shouldn't be getting away with in a normal game of Magic. And it was something that I thought would be really splashy for something like this, where, hey, somebody prints like an 8-mana wizard or warrior or something like that, and now Gather the Party has a cool thing that it can bring out. I think the biggest thing in these sets of microsets actually is from Curtains Fall. There's a 6-mana rogue creature in green that's a 6/6 trample, and it has an additional ability of turning something into a 6/6 until end of turn. So a cool way to interact between these two sets and take advantage of the power that is available with the card Gather the Party.
And at the same time, 3 mana, hope that the 6/6 is in your top 6 cards of your library. A 3 mana 6/6 trample is strong and limited, but there are there are ways to, that is acceleration rather than that is a very different thing than getting like a Winota combo out of this, or even something that gives you like massive hard advantage. I mean, hopefully you're hitting Inviting Troop, this 5 and a green 6/6 trample, and maybe some other rogue, or maybe a cleric, warrior, or wizard from Veyrathal as the other card to put into your hand, possibly. You've got something maybe a little bit spicy or a little bit fun, or even just a little bit straightforward to help smooth this party mechanic compared to Zendikar Rising. And that is, you've brought back Changeling, right?
Yeah, so they did not use Changeling in the Zendikar Rising because my understanding is that Changelings were not native to Zendikar, so it wouldn't necessarily make sense to introduce them. So they use these creatures where they spelled out some of the Changeling text, but they just made it very party specific. So something like this creature is also a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard, and in the first part of the rules text. And that didn't necessarily sit well with me in terms of it looks clunky. Changeling is right there. And so I thought, okay, great. I get to kind of fix this mistake in my mind by having Changeling. So I've got Coin Turner Mercenary, 1 and a red, creature shapeshifter. It's a 2/1, common. And it has Changeling, so this card is every creature type. It has Reach, and whenever 1 or more other creatures you control enter, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Yeah, and you also have, I believe, just 1/1 Changeling Shapeshifter tokens as well as a
Yes.
kind of neat thing. And as a reminder for our audience who may or may not have played Zendikar Rising or been playing during Zendikar Rising, amazing how time passes in all sorts of ways. Your party consists of up to 1 of each of Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard. So just having a Changeling out doesn't give you a full party, but it does flexibly fill 1 of those slots. And so if I have this Changeling out and then I cast a Rogue and a Warrior, the changeling can still fill the cleric or the wizard sort of role.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I think, an intentional design, because if having a changeling immediately filled your your party, or immediately did the full discount, etc., then Wizards was intentionally designing these cards to not be too broken with the kind of clumsy, fun old Lorwyn changelings, or the up and coming Kaldheim, more aggressively costed changelings. Yeah. Yeah. You've got another returning mechanic here that I feel a certain amount of fondness for. I don't know if you, I imagine you feel fondness for it considering you brought it back. But that's monstrosity, which looks like it's kind of a blue green. I see it's also on at least one black card, but like little monstrosity 1 rather than monstrosity 4 with some big kicks and stuff. Do you want to tell us about Frostgaze Griff, the blue green rare?
Yes. So Frostgaze Griff, 1 green blue creature griffin. It's a 3/1. It has flying. Whenever you put one or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, tap target creature you don't control. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control this creature. And then it has 3 green-blue monstrosity 1. Lots of nostalgia in this one card, actually. 3/1 flyer is a stat line that I really appreciate. So that's
Mhm.
your Vendilion click. That's your Liev Sky Knight from Return to
Wow.
Ravnica.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow. Talk about, hitting the nostalgia. Yeah.
you got your +1/+1 counter synergy. You got monstrosity. I played a lot of original Theros, Nessian Asp 4/5 reach that has a huge monstrosity cost, and you get a bunch of counters on it. But it was just it was so powerful as a comment. It was hard to not be attracted to it. And then like a little bit of a dungeon geist thing going on here, where you can put a counter on this Frostgaze Griff and tap something down, and it stays tapped down. But you get the extra synergy here. I think something that modernizes it a little bit by, hey, every time you put a +1/+1 counter on something, you get to tap something down and keep it tapped. And then a little bit of that risk reward gameplay of, I'm kind of relying on having this Frostgaze Griff stay on the battlefield to keep a bunch of things tapped down. Maybe I actually don't want to engage with it in combat, but it is evasive, so I want to engage with it in combat. And I think that plays interestingly, to say the least. And then, yeah, so monstrosity is our counter mechanic to the party stuff and the skill up stuff, and it's representing kind of the monsters of Veyrathal. And it's kind of what the parties are going out and killing. Maybe I've never played it, but maybe a la Monster Hunter or something like that, where you're going out to take care of some horrible beastie, and you're going to bring that back and get some type of reward.
Sure. And so thinking about this microset as a whole and kind of the gestalt of the flavor identity and the mechanical expression of these things, it is kind of fun that instead of, okay, to make this classic D&D sort of trope, where we have this dungeon that we're procedurally going through in kind of a obscure way, instead it's like, oh, you are there, you're kind of one of the players, you are this almost like Skyrim protagonist we sometimes use to refer, where like, yeah, eventually I'm going to be the head of the Thieves Guild and the archmage of the magic school, and because you can just go and do all these things because you are like the vessel, the player character, the point of view. And so you can go, okay, I'm going to do the mage things. Oh, and here's my friends, my creatures here going to be doing things. We're going to find some magic items, which is these sword tokens. We're going to encounter mysterious things and defeat them using teamwork, which is the party together. We're going to go up against terrible foes, and then partway through, they're going to have the second phase of their boss fight, which is going to be the monstrosity of it all. I think it's a fun kind of fantasy in a real way. What's do you have a favorite design from the set, or one more design you'd love to like show off for the listener at home? The listener at
I
home who can click through to a link in the show notes to take a look at this specific set.
I think that this micro set does a good job of showing off some of the stuff that I really like about Magic the Gathering, about doing custom design. So skill up and the skill tree being an outside the game mechanic is something that I'm kind of making a name for myself with over the things that I'm doing. But I really like a couple of the gold cards here that are a little more close to canon Magic in many respects. So I've got Shocking Research, one blue and a red instant. Draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Shocking Research deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of cards you discarded this turn. It's a shock. It's a research, so it's a 3 mana draw 2, discard 2. So that's frantic research. Just jamming them together, I think still creates an interesting card, and I think that it has something to it where people are going to be like, okay, how do I loop this in with a looting effect, or how do I maybe cycle a card and then get a bolt out of this? And it's a small thing that I think players really grasp onto and enjoy the gameplay of.
And when we're in this 2 microsets together, duplicate seal, jumpstart E sort of space, Shocking Research is a card that sometimes will be, hey, I just need a blue-red card. I need some like card filtering removal, sort of little advantage thing. But other times might be, hey, I really want to get a reanimator effect on turn 4 or on 4 mana set up, and this is going to be like my best way of doing that while keeping parity on the board. Or this is going to hit in my set the red green mechanic is when you draw your second card each turn, you do whatever. Or, in my set, it's whenever a player has discarded this turn, all of the your creatures double in power or whatever. Like that, you can have these things that sets frequently have some small mechanic affecting, and say, well, those things probably happen in a given set. There's probably some combination of either a drawing thing, a discarding thing, a graveyard thing, a dealing damage thing, a channel or a cycling sort of smoothing. There's going to be some combinations. And so we see blood tokens as, okay, great. If nothing else, a single blood token can turn your shocking research into a bolting research, as you say.
How about yourself? Do you have any cards in here that jumped out at you?
Shocking Research was also going to be the one.
Of course.
For how complicated things can be, and as texty as I'm starting to get used to cards being, I'm loving some of these simpler cards. And obviously, when you have outside the game mechanics, that can sometimes make it easier to have a shorter card. A number of cards in like the Lord of the Rings set are relatively short because the whole ring bearer stuff is
Yes.
on a different card outside the game. Also looking at, for just white and a blue for an uncommon instant, it's Enriching Study. You gain 3 life, draw a card, skill up. Which is again like real simple. 3 life, you're replacing itself. It's like, okay, this is a normal thing. Oh, and then skill up. So this could be you gain 3 life, draw a card, and let's see here. You gain 3 life, draw a card, scry 1. Okay, no. You gain 3 life, draw a card, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. Okay. You gain 3 life, draw a card. Tokens can't block this turn. Like there's interesting weird things here. Probably the funniest one is you gain 3 life, draw a card, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. But you don't have to. There's a may on that activation, and very rarely is that going to be your only choice.
And the modularity of the skill tree does mean that all of these skill up cards are kind of modal in their own way as well, and I think that would make each of them play differently, match over match. I think the thing that's going to come out of the whole play testing is fine tuning the individual modes of the skill tree, putting them in the right spot, because there's a big difference between getting something on your first skill up versus getting something on your third skill up versus getting something on your sixth skill up. So finding the right spots for that, and then making sure that the effects promote good Magic gameplay as well. I think Peter has identified, hey, I create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. That's going to bog down the board in a way that is potentially unfun. I've built in tokens can't block this turn as an available fighter skill to see if maybe the two of them can play in a way together. But it's going to be interesting to see if that bears out. The other thing that I have to be mindful of with all of this is, hey, there's only so many cards that skill up. They're not going to make it into everybody's deck because some of them are gated behind being multicolor, and that's so from a developing this into like a larger set. This isn't necessarily going to be the best avenue for it, but this does give us a chance to play with some cards and see what they do, and make some less than scientific decisions on them, which is okay. I think that's a cool part of the whole experience.
And okay, there are tons of cards that we could talk about here. We fit one more in, which is also the card of the day here. It's Nightwalker War Priest. It's a common 2/4 for 3 and a black-red hybrid. So 4 mana for a 2/4. Creature Nightmare Cleric Warrior. So it could fill 2 potential spots of the party, one at a time. It has Menace, and whenever you discard 1 or more cards, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And talk about a fun glue sort of card, both being hybrid, so it's like flexible into multiple decks. A 2/4 Menace for 4 is like, there's a lot of decks that, okay, this would be like the last extra card that I fit in. This is just enough because it can help hold a board, but it can also help kind of get in those extra points because of the little evasion on it. It's a cleric and a warrior for your party. I suppose it's a cleric or a warrior, but depending on how you count inclusive ands for or inclusive ors. But also, it's a little fun thing because if you have developed your mage all the way to the end, or you developed to the third point of mage, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. You can potentially be like, oh yeah, I got up to 6 cards and I'm just going to cash all of them in, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. And I'm going to, make this a 8/4 Menace and try to get through to win. Or I've got Nightwalker War Priest out. It's capable of attacking. It doesn't have summoning sickness. And I'm going to spend my once per turn to discard your hand and draw 2 cards. And then I'm going to cast a skill up and I'm going to discard my hand and draw 2 cards. And you just do that 3 times. It's like, well, even though you didn't have 6 cards in hand, oh no, but it's 1 or more, isn't it? Never mind. I talked myself into thinking this was cooler than it is.
But I think you did highlight a potential, like the second line where, you discard your hand and draw 2 cards with the mindset of, hey, I've only got 8 cards left in library. I know some of them are more skill up cards. I think I'm going to try to chain this to make my Nightwalker War Priest into that 4/6 or 5/7 or whatever in order to win this game on this pivotal turn. And, I think that's interesting. I think Nightwalker War Priest also, again, plays well with other sets where maybe discard is a theme, or somebody gets into some exciting faithless looting style cards where you get cheap discard outlets. Cycling is another thing that I thought would be potentially in other people's sets because it is a good glue mechanic. All in all, I think you nailed it, where Nightwalker War Priest is definitely a glue card. It's going to be a sometimes card for some decks, and then it's going to be I need another cleric for party, or I need another body in my deck to stay proactive, and the 2/4 Menace body does a good job of that.
Yeah, great. Any closing thoughts on this experiment, this fun project?
I think something that I didn't get a chance to touch on was designing intentionally for microsets versus, using a microset as kind of a pitch. And I think we saw different ways that people came at this. I did a little bit of mixing and matching for, I think skill tree is something that could be used on a wider set and could be developed further. But the stuff like the Shocking Research, the Nightwalker War Priest, some other cards that we didn't get into, where it's just a glue card for Veyrathal, but it is something that could work really well within another set. I was very intentional with my designs on just making them have those facets to them where, oh no, this is the exact card I need to make my deck work, making them those gluey role player cards. I think there's lots of cool ways to make micro sets, and I think that this is an exercise that we might do with some regularity, grab another word as a jumping off point, and I think anybody can do it, which is really fun and exciting. And then my last thing is, I think it's really interesting that we could do whole new micro sets with a new word, or we could also do sequel micro sets where we're taking a look at the jumping off points that have already started, and so Peter's done the 45 cards dedicated to archers. Okay, well, what about the 45 cards that are dedicated to swordsmen, or the 45 cards dedicated to shield bearers, or something like that, and we could see some expansions there.
Yeah. And I think another kind of sense of expansion is I can look at Curtains Fall and go, well, I came up with some designs that I couldn't fit into this 45, or here's this mechanic, but it doesn't have, there's only 3 cards with this mechanic. What if instead there were 12 cards? What if, that sort of expansion from microset, that this gets your foot in the door, you're designing mechanics, you're designing potentially cycles or just like color combinations of things. Maybe you've got archetype uncommons, maybe you're doing something different, who knows? But then expanding that into a full set, you've already completed a big part of it. You've already done a lot of the work for that. And so it's a fun snapshot in that way if you want to expand into something bigger. A lot of times people assume I need to design a whole set if I'm going to be designing anything, and then it's hard to get to that point, or it's hard to get feedback from that point. I think here, these 45 cards kind of following this rubric is a great way to put cards in front of somebody and then get feedback before you try to finish a whole set even.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so Ignited did build in that, hey, you're going to do this privately, and then there's going to be this big reveal. The big reveal that we did was also kind of fun. Folks did teasers for their sets with cards you can expect, creature types you're going to see, card names that you're going to see. I think that there is another way where you could do micro sets in a more public kind of space, where you're sharing designs kind of as you go along and getting feedback that way as well. I do think that Ignited has got us to a place where, again, you can make some cards and you can talk about them and you can develop a context around them, which makes it easier for discussion, for offering critiques. I think that that's something that can be difficult with looking at a singular design is, okay, well, what's the space around that card look like? And okay, well, I'm going to mentally put it into this space because I think that's where it fits the best. Okay, and I'm going to critique from there. Well, this offers, hey, it's a biteful rather than a nibble, but it's not as big as a full entree of a full set. So people can look at your cards and they can see the context, but they don't need to, get into the weeds of 260 plus fresh designs.
Absolutely. Speaking of fresh designs, we've got our April design challenge coming up. Our design challenge this month is Fool's April. So submit either a real card with a name and any relevant creature types changed, or a custom card. Either way, you're going to be submitting it in the thread in our Discord, including the spoiler text that does the actual reveal of what the real card is, or revealing that it's a custom card. We will be reviewing the cards and guessing on the pod. So you can see, can you fool us whether this is a real one or not? So that's Fool's April. We've also got some bonus points to kind of help focus, which are Fool's Gold. The card can be cast for a single color of mana. And Fool's Rules, give it 3 lines of rules text. And that's going to be due on April 25th.
What's your temptation level on clicking the No Tim's Juliet's Allowed Club on the Beacon of Creation Discord?
I'm excited, and I will resist the temptation. So you can use the threads in the Discord server or chat with other people and kind of figure out the things, and we will be surprised. You can see whether you can fool us. And again, yeah, that's due April 25th. So that's our podcast for this week. You can join our Discord with the link in the show notes. Thanks for being on the pod, Redbay.
Thanks for having me, Juliet.
Anything you'd like to tell people about?
I think that the things that are going on the Beacon of Creation Discord are some of the more exciting things that you can do in general in custom Magic, and I'm going to just encourage everybody join over there. Jump in on the design challenge. Check out micro sets. Even jump in on micro set if you're feeling that this is something captivating for you. And then there is a You Make the Pack. It is kind of coming to a close, but there's still some slots available for that. Mm-hmm. That's our story pack. We're following along the story of Su Yin and Ortilgar in a world where things have gone horribly awry because of ancient powerful artifact that is not the One Ring. And then as well, check out some of the Beaconeers sets that are kind of in progress. Jardeka from Crafted Lava is true. Outpost Zero from Ignited. Storms of Yurzavan by Larsent, or Wrenchmar by Peter, aka Mono White Border, and myself.
Yeah. I do have a thing to recommend on the pod here, which is a new video essay. This one's 19 minutes, so it is it's not one of those like 3-hour long sort of things, by Aaron Voigt. It's called Reverse Engineering a Definition of Yuri, and it is a video essay about a game called Yuri Chess that I have played a lot of, and also did the like interpretation for and design and a lot of the other parts of. And it is a really interesting examination of the idea of like Yuri of Absence and chess, and extrapolating out things from, you take a game and then you figure out what the meaning of the title is from the game. And so like chess is a war game. It's a really interesting thing. And the link for that will also be in the show notes there.
Very cool.
You can talk to us on the Discord. That's the best way. You can check out the show notes on beaconofcreation.com. You can find me on most social medias at Folly Persist.
And you can find me only on the Discord as Redbay.
Thanks for listening, and always remember, skill, unlike art, comes from Old Norse. In this case, skill, originally the power of discernment, sound judgment, that which is reasonable, from the late 12th century, the senses which are all now obsolete, from Old Norse skill, distinction, ability to make out, discernment, adjustment, which is related to skilja, to separate, discern, or understand.